Sometimes silence does more than refuse to speak. It shapes the edges of a town, casts shadows in places where laughter used to live, and collects like dust on the things people touched last. Maple Hollow sat like a pebble in the hand of northern Maine, small, dense with pines, its roads folding back on themselves until strangers felt foolish for getting lost. The town measured itself in daily routines: coffee poured at dawn, hands passing mail through screen doors, softball games that smelled of cut grass and hot dog grease. Life here moved slowly enough for people to notice the small betrayals of time: paint flaking from porch railings, the diner clock losing a minute every week. Every June, someone left a single white flower on an old mile marker along Route 7. No card. No explanation. Just a quiet gesture that bent like a punctuation mark over a sentence the town could not finish. Emily Carter was the reason. Emily was 22, slight as a sketch folded into itself, with hands that always had a smudge of charcoal along the knuckles. She kept notebooks stacked like postcards under her bed, faces, a row of telephone poles, the diner's neon letters drawn until the glass looked warm on the page. She worked long nights at the Maple Stop, serving coffee to farmers and truckers, listening more than answering. She'd drawn hearts in diner windows and remembered exactly which pie people liked best. When her acceptance letter to art school in Boston arrived, it settled into the house like a new light bulb, small, bright, urgent. She kept tracing her finger along the edge of that letter as if by feeling the paper she could make the future real. Diane Carter had been Emily's world since Robert left when their daughter was 10. Her life narrowed to small scaffolding, school forms, work schedules, the ritual of driving Emily to the diner and waiting in the car until she went inside, as if proximity might solder safety. The ritual was ordinary until the night it wasn't. June 17, 2003, arrived humid and load-bearing, the kind of air that pressed down on small towns and made even conversations sound muffled. Emily clocked in at 3, in the familiar blue apron, hair tied back. She moved through the diner like a practice note, a plate here, a pot of coffee there, a small smile for the regulars. At 8:30 p.m., a man in a flannel shirt sat at the counter. He ordered coffee and then left it unfinished. For an hour, he kept his back to the camera and his face to the steam. At 9 o'clock, Emily wiped the table, said goodnight, and left into the waiting evening. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station later traced her silhouette turning right toward the lane that would take her home. She should have been home in 15 minutes. She never arrived. By 10, Diane's stomach was a hollow drum. The calls went straight to voicemail. By 10:15, she was driving with headlights slicing through the black, wipers beating time to a heartbeat that was not hers. She checked the road she had driven 1,000 times and found only the small detritus of late summer, an empty bottle, the crumpled remnant of a delivery flyer. Dawn brought the car, a familiar sedan pulled over at the roadside, 4 miles from the diner, keys in the ignition, the purse and phone on the passenger seat. The car was locked from the outside, the driver's door shut as if someone had walked back into the dark and been swallowed by it. There were no prints. No obvious sign of struggle. Dogs led to a scent that petered out in the tree line like a sentence that had been cut off midword. Detective Laura Bennett, who would hold this case like a stone in her pocket for years, said later it looked too clean to be normal. The scene felt arranged. The town felt violated. Searches turned up nothing. Flyers multiplied on telephone poles, coffee shops hummed with the quietly frantic energy of people trying to do something, anything. Reporters came, circling the story with the neat hunger of vultures, lights set on tripods, microphones thrust where Diane's jaw clenched. But phones rang with phantom tips. "Check the old quarry," a breathy voice said one night. The quarry was swept clear of leaves and hope. The calls became part of the landscape, anonymous, unhelpful, cruel. There was, for weeks, the man at the counter. The camera recorded only his back. He had paid cash. He didn't finish his coffee. He vanished into the same fog that swallowed Emily. And then, in the static of slow leads and red string on pinboards, a grainy highway camera caught a dark pickup pulling off near an old mile marker at 9:18 p.m., less than a mile from where Emily's car would later be found. The truck's image was the sort that inventors of nightmares love: low resolution, too dark to be kind, time-stamped in a way that made it all feel unbearably plausible. Months of leads, interviews, alibis, whispered suspicions produced nothing prosecutable. The deep ache of possibility was filled by rumor. A man named Harold Pierce, a retired mechanic who lived on a forgotten stretch of road, came under suspicion when a software enhancement revealed, in a glass reflection, the silhouette of a pickup truck across from the diner. Phone records linked Pierce to an outgoing call at 9:22 p.m. to a disposable cell phone. In his locker, behind rust and the smell of oil, investigators found a faded red scarf Diane recognized with a hollowing certainty. Trace DNA matched Emily. It was a dictionary definition of circumstantial evidence. It wasn't enough. The district attorney said the case was too thin. Pierce claimed innocence and then moved away. The town, which had once been dense with shared purpose, frayed into suspicion. People stopped waving on Main Street. The maple stop closed. Diane kept a porch light on like a prayer, keeping vigil against a darkness that measured itself in the weeks since. And then came the letters, typed, anonymous, arriving at the sheriff's office like small, sterile riddles. "You're looking in the wrong place. She was taken. Truth hides in the reflection." The notes never had a signature. They carried no prints. Each one was a kind of pointing finger that sent detectives pacing back to places they'd already looked. Laura Bennett, who had once been content to solve burglaries and manage a quiet beat, found herself tethered to the case in ways that annoyed and unmoored her in equal measure. It wasn't heroism so much as ownership. The file sat on her desk, a photograph of Emily pinned in the center, red string radiating like veins. Sometimes she dreamed of reflections, windows showing things that weren't there. One late reanalysis of the diner footage produced the smallest mercy. In a frame at 9:03 p.m., there was the reflection of another car across the street, a dark pickup. The angle matched the highway cam's truck. When the tack of investigation led them upwards to the apartment above the old hardware store, county records showed it had been rented under a false name for 3 months that spring. The lease read, H. Pierce. They found nothing in the flat but dust and a photograph, face down. It showed the diner from years before, and in the glass's reflection, a woman who might have been Emily, but the date on the photograph predated Emily's birth. It was a small, maddening puzzle piece that made hope and dread knot together. Was this a clue or the work of a mind that stitched images by accident? Time, the world's indifferent mechanism, smoothed other people's lives away from the case. Detectives rotated away. Reporters moved on. The search that had once been the town's heartbeat reduced to small rituals. Each June, lanterns were set upon the river and sent out to be claimed by the dark. Someone always left a white flower at that mile marker on Route 7. Diane kept her light on. 5 years after that humid night, a land clearing uncovered a buried storm drain, rusted and half-sealed. Inside lay a fragment of red fabric, a scrap not as whole as the scarf but of the same weave. Someone had scratched letters into the drain rim before the metal had fully rusted, E.C. The initials were small, almost petulant, and yet Diane, who had slept on vertigo for years, felt a recognition that did not need evidence. The town reopened the file, quietly, briefly. Forensics could not tie the fabric conclusively to Emily, but for Diane, it was another way of saying, she'd been here. "We don't always get answers," Diane told Detective Bennett in the porch light many nights later, folding her hands as if to keep them from shaking. "I don't need answers. I need her story not to be forgotten." Bennett wrote in a report that went no further than her drawer, "Some cases don't end. They echo, in people, in places, in the silence left behind." The diner was torn down and replaced by a gas station that kept a framed photograph of Emily on the wall, with a small candle beneath it. Strangers paused before it, not because they had known her, but because the photograph made a room colder in its absence. If you drive through Maple Hollow now, you will see an ordinary town. Asphalt, clapboard, a chipped stop sign. But if you stand for a while under the worn porch light of the Carter house as the sun tucks behind pines, you might feel a small thing like a syllable suspended in air. Not a voice. Not a fact. Just a kind of presence, something that proves the town kept a conversation with a ghost and kept talking anyway. Some voices do not leave, they stay in the way streets remember footsteps, and the way a porch light continues to burn. They become part of the town's grammar, the sentence that never quite finishes.